Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for a short story which will appear in two separate playlists on this channel. Number one, obviously, being the short story discussion playlist, but number two, I'm going short story by short story through Dubliners by James Joyce. This being the fifth. 1 second, please. I've been doing too much work lately, I can't tell. The fifth out of 15 in the Dubliner series, as well as the 28th short story discussion on this channel. 28 short stories in the short story playlist. So, what we have here is a recap of the story, a So What Happened section, then a lit crit portion of the video, and finally a writer's corner, for which I actually have I'm all dirty. I actually have a full excerpt from a website because I think there's an important term to writing which is often overlooked, and this short story is a very good example of it. So, what happened in After the Race by James Joyce? Okay, Jimmy is rich and went to Cambridge because that's a rich kid thing to do. He met Charles there, a rich French guy, because rich people meet at rich places. And there's also Andre, who is Charles' French cousin. This all makes sense so far, right? It's all lockstep. Also, obviously, if we've got those three, there's Vilona, who is, of course, Hungarian and a pianist. And, worst of all, very poor. I just choked myself. An auto race has just finished, and now people are lining up, just sort of cheering cars. And we'll get a little bit into why that might be in a moment. The exuberance pleases Jimmy because he just invested in an auto company. Then we go forward a bit to the young men at a dinner party. Rich people things to do, right? That's what rich people do, I imagine. Then, after the party, they walk through the streets of Dublin, where they run into Farley, an American acquaintance with a yacht, because rich, right? Hooray! Yacht party. Party and card games, by the way, and Jimmy, dear Jimmy, loses lots of money. Lots of card games, lots of money. He loses even more than he drinks, and he knows he will regret tonight, probably financially, but definitely because of the drinking. His head is pounding, but oh well. Just then, Vilona, the piano-playing Hungarian wagey, opens the door. Surprise! It's daybreak. Okay, that's what happens in this short story. And I have to be honest. Look, I don't like referencing other people's takes on the stories or the short stories or the novels. The sort of academic consensus is not as interesting to me. And by the way, if you're here watching this, I hope it's not as interesting to you. If you want someone else's opinion, go there, right? This channel, I try to build up around my opinions, my interpretations of text. And this, kind of a hard one for me. This one was difficult for me to actually wring something out of, but I think we got around to it. Now, the cars. Let's talk about the cars first off. People were watching an auto race, and now it seems they're just lined up on the sidewalks applauding cars that are coming past. This short story is first published in 1914. The first car was imported to Ireland in the year 1898, 16 years before the publication of this short story. Even By 1904, 10 years before this short story, by 1904, there were a total of 38 registered cars in Ireland. 38 by 1904. This is sort of the same as if today someone were writing a short story about electric cars. Electric cars really came about in a major way around 2008. 2008 to 2024, sort of the same as 1898 to 1914 when this short story was written. Along those lines, so I am very interested in the Tesla story. I think there's a lot going on there. And part of what's going on there is that Tesla is absolutely eating the lunch of the traditional OEMs, the traditional car manufacturers here in the United States. And we get in this short story this weird little quote, short story about cars. One of the protagonists, probably the protagonist in the story, Jimmy, just invested in a car company, right? So there's investing, there's cars, there's new cars. Farley was an American. For anyone who doesn't know, this is weird to read because, what's his name? Jim Farley is the current CEO of Ford. I think he's the cousin of Chris Farley, but he is currently the CEO of Ford. So seeing Farley was an American in a short story about cars written in 1914 is sort of a stunning thing to see, sort of a weird coinkydink there. But so here's where I want to start with sort of what we're doing here. This short story feels, pardon me, tell me if I'm wrong, this short story feels like James Joyce wrote an F. Scott Fitzgerald story. It feels like James Joyce woke up, zipped up his F. Scott Fitzgerald skin suit, and went to the old typewriter and plucked away at this one. So is there a main moral to it? Can we look to F. Scott Fitzgerald for a moral to this story? A reason, a meaning, an interpretation? Well, I think so. These guys, they feel young. They feel on fire. They feel as if they're just getting started with life, just getting started being the center of attention, just getting started. I think one of them is 26. They're all around the same age, I believe. They're just coming into being the generation that will inherit from their predecessors. That 26-year-old, so 26, you're probably starting a little bit of what it is that you hope to do in life, assuming it, usurping it from the prior generation. And here they are. They just had a big race. They were just applauded driving down the streets feeling like superstars. They just had a night out on the town. There was liquor and cards and a lot of socializing and movement, but no real work. Now, Hemingway told us, be wary of movement in the place of action. There was no real action for these men this night. There was nothing real going on. They were all moving, partying, cohorting. And just as the realities of this, the realities of the world start to crash down on Jimmy, he's had a great night, got applauded, met some old friends, went to a party, a dinner party at that, went to a yacht party afterwards, and there was some Dublin in between, right? As a nice town. All of this stuff was going on. And just as he's crashing down, realizing, ooh, I'm going to regret this. Tonight was a lot of action, a lot of sizzle, not a whole lot of steak. More cowboy hat than cows. A lot of stuff going on, but not a whole lot of important stuff. It feels important. We feel good. We're all gassed up. But we might end up regretting a lot of tonight, especially with the liquor. My head is pounding. And just as the realities of the day are coming down on him, just as he is crashing, he's beginning to crash down to Jimmy before tonight. He's crashing down to the real world. And just as he does, boom, Valona opens the door. Hooray, it's a brand new day. As he is crashing, boom, it's a brand new day. As he is coming down, boom, oh, the sun is out. As he is coming into his darkest moments of the evening, boom, oh, you thought so. It's really daytime, sucker. Invulnerability, unstoppability. We're back here to the go, go, go. This was sort of the age, right? We were leading into the age of the flappers. We were coming to the end of a war. 1915 was the armistice, right? We were getting there. It was coming around. It was all sunshine on the horizon. Here we had a man getting in over his head, losing his money, maybe his investments, having the night of his life, but it's starting to wear on him until that door opens. The big Hungarian piano-playing Wagey decides to open the door, and boom, it's sunshine. There's no stopping now, fellas. We're right back to it. That, I think, is the real conundrum of the short story. And it feels like an F. Scott Fitzgerald short story, doesn't it? This feels like The Great Gatsby in Dublin. Now, at this point, it's still James Gatz, not Gatsby. It's James Gatz, here, played by Jimmy. How fitting. Now I want to go to the writer's corner. So, first off, just a small thing here. It is, so who am I to critique James Joyce, right? I think we can all agree on that. But bad writing exists, bad writing happens, and I think sometimes even the greats have bad writing in their writing. They are susceptible to it because they'll get it, right? The greats sit down at their typewriters, they're pounding away, and there's a rough sentence, and they just put it out there. They'll get it. They'll understand. Yeah, it's not a great sentence, but they'll get it. We get this, quote, rapid motion through space elates one. So does notoriety. So does possession of money. James, Mr. Joyce, are these the human beings of Earth of whom we often hear you speak? Is that what's going on here? Are we an alien here, James Joyce? This is a wonderfully stilted sentence. Rapid motion through space elates one. So does notoriety. So does possession of money. Now, we could understand this through the lens of what is coming. Towards the end of that night, right before Violna opens the door, the motion has stopped. The notoriety is not quite there because he's among friends. He's among everyone who is sort of equals, even the Wagey. The Wagey, in fact, opens the door, right? So does the possession of money. But towards the end of this story, Jimmy has lost great deals of money. Still, this is a bad sentence. I don't care that it's very symbolic. I don't care that it has the end of the short story sort of foreshadowed here. It's a poorly written sentence. It works, but boy, does it feel funny to read it. So the next thing I want to talk about is psychic distance. What is psychic distance? This is an important phrase for writers because we get, oh, I don't remember what website I got this from, but it is this: psychic distance. In creative writing, how involved the reader feels to a story can strengthen the clarity, pacing, suspense, and drama of a story, or alternatively, draw a reader out of a scene that is critical to understanding the narrative. Often, stories depend on the perspectives of particular characters to lend meaning and detail throughout the story's structure, plot, and other ambitions. In his work, The Art of Fiction, great read, by the way. I cannot recommend The Art of Fiction enough. John Gardner, 1983, describes psychic distance as the distance the reader feels between himself and the events of the story. In terms of point of view, larger psychic distances can present broad contexts or greater arcs that do not need to be as detailed, while closer psychic distance is used to bring the reader closer to scenes where specific details are important to engage with the story. Now, normally, first person narrators are the closest psychic distance. First person narrators, psychic distance, the way I always thought about it, was how closely are you looking at the action? Close psychic distance is a first person narrator. I picked up the can. I put the can down. Second person narrators, kind of weird, but you can do it. And it is pretty close, very close psychic distance, as long as the reader is willing to accept it. Now, what we have here is third person, but with a close psychic distance. This narrator, now you say it's a close psychic distance because this narrator is able to tell you things that are happening inside the characters' heads. A lot of times, the sort of go to example for a third person distant psychic distance is Ernest Hemingway, who sometimes skips out completely on what is happening inside a character's head. Inside the head, literally the closest you can be. Hemingway shows you the motions. Hemingway gives you what the character says. Hemingway tells you what happened. The man got up. He walked across the room, sat down, put his elbows on the table, put his head into his hands. Now we get this guy's a little depressed. But we have here a very close psychic distance because our narrator is telling us not just what these characters are doing or feeling, but he's giving us backstory to the characters. Otherwise, we never would have known that Jimmy had just invested in a car company, etc. Wish I had taken the time to highlight an example here, but it turns out I'm kind of an idiot. Decidedly, Villona was in excellent spirits. He kept up a bass hum of melody for miles of the road. It's a close psychic distance because we get this telling us that he was in excellent spirits. Does this sentence still make sense? Well, we have to take out a little bit more than just that part. Bologna. He kept up a deep bass hum of melody for miles of the road. That tells us Villona is really feeling himself. We don't have to have the part where he was actually feeling himself. Was in excellent spirits. We don't have to have that there, but we get it from the writer because the writer is able to tell us what is going on in these characters' heads and where they came from. Now, the next thing that I want to critique here, I want to talk about, we get a ton of characters in very short order. Where are we at? In one of these trimly built cars was a party of four young men whose spirits seemed to be at present well above the level of successful Gallicism. In fact, these four young men were almost hilarious. They were Charles Seguin, Charlie, the owner of the car, André Rivière, a young electrician of Canadian birth, a huge Hungarian named Valona, and a neatly groomed young man named Doyle. Seguin was in good humor because he had unexpectedly received some orders in advance. So that's a lot of stuff going on, and we're expected to remember those characters going forward. Now, what would help us is a little bit of a different introduction to these characters. Show them doing something. There was Charles Seguin, the owner of the car, um, tapping a melody onto the steering wheel. Andre Riviere, a young electrician of Canadian birth, counting the waivers on in groups of 10. This tells us he is a mathematically inclined individual. This is sort of what he does. A Hungarian named Vilona, um, who was, well, I hate this word, I hate adverbs, but we're going to use it, excitedly gripping the door handle, almost tearing it from the uh, door itself. Now, this tells us he's a big fella. And a neatly groomed man named Doyle. Give whatever you want for Doyle. But when we incorporate a little bit of the character of a person during their introduction, not only does it give our minds space between characters, it gives us something to remember those characters by. If this guy's nearly tearing the door handle straight off the door, we're going to remember he's the big guy. He's a strong fella, and later on we get him introduced as such. So that is just a little bit that I think would be interesting to see in this story, because I had to keep referencing this. Maybe I'm the idiot, and undoubtedly I'm an idiot, but I had to keep referencing this paragraph time and again to remember who was this guy, who was this one, who was that. If you give us little characterizations every time that someone new is introduced, it tells us about the character, and it gives our mind time to digest the name in accordance to the characteristic, in accordance to the person that we're remembering going forward. That is all I have for this video. If you enjoy what I do here, hitting the like button really helps me out here on this channel. It tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. Literature is the only thing that I talk about on this channel, dropping numerous videos per week. This is the fifth in a 15-part series, journeying short story by short story through Dubliners by James Joyce. This is also, we're getting close to 30 short story discussions in this playlist, so check those out if you are so inclined. And if you are not subscribed, you are here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button in order to stick around for more literary goodness. And I hope to have you back for the next